Hey everybody, welcome to CAF Warbird Tube, the show where we talk about World War II, aviation, history, and so much more. Warbird Tube is produced by the Commemorative Air Force, the world's largest flying museum. Our mission is to educate, inspire, and honor through flight and living history experiences. The CAF began the Warbird movement more than 65 years ago, and thanks to the support of individuals like you, we continue to grow strong. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and now our host, Steve Buss. Thanks for watching and keep 'em flying.
Good evening, aviation fans, and welcome to CAF Warbird Tube for this week. Glad to have you with us. Tonight on episode number 180, we're going to check in with the B-25, Miss Mitchell. And the Minnesota wing takes care of her. We'll talk more about the airplane and what it takes to keep it in the air. And this is also one of the airplanes that is featured in the 12 Planes of Christmas. So we're continuing our 12 Planes of Christmas theme this fall. So we'll talk more about the airplane in just a moment. But before we get going, whether you're joining us for the first time or you're a loyal Warbird Tube fan, we do appreciate that you are with us tonight. If you do enjoy our content, don't forget to spread the word on your favorite social media platforms. We sincerely appreciate that. Now, Warbird Tube is made possible by the Commemorative Air Force. To find out more about the CAF, our events, aircraft like Miss Mitchell, our local units like the Minnesota Wing, or how you can be a part of the fun, just visit our website. It is commemorativeairforce.org. Now, tonight, as you're watching the presentation, you might have some questions. Just type those in the chat box, and we'll try to answer them either during our presentation or before we sign off tonight. And joining us now are some of the caretakers of Miss Mitchell, Jim and Amy Loria and Chris Van Nostrum. Glad to have you all on the show tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
Thanks for having us.
Well, let's find out a little about your background first. I always find it fascinating how people become a part of the CAF, because we seem to come from all different backgrounds and different motivations, but we're all getting together to help keep these airplanes in the air and to tell the story of the greatest generation. So, Chris, I'll start with you. How did you become involved with CAF?
I knew a buddy of mine I went to college with who was flying Miss Mitchell, and I saw his social media stuff, and I reached out to a friend, was like, that's kind of cool. And he's like, yeah, it's in the cities, like right where you live, like 30-minute drive. And I'm like, I should go out there. And he's like, yeah, you should go out there. So went out there, met Jim, got to know the group. And 2 weeks later, I was in the back of Miss Mitchell riding out to Fort Wayne for an air show and helped with that and fell in love and just kept showing up after that and then started flying for him.
Yeah, so you are one of the pilots for Miss Mitchell, right?
Correct, yep.
Good. About how many hours do you have?
Just probably around 50 hours. Okay. It's kind of where there. It was a very busy season last year, a little lighter this year for me with my job. But yeah, been flying her and terrific airplane, love it.
Good. Are you checked out in any other aircraft from the wing?
I was supposed to do our PT-22 this year, but just due to the weather and some other stuff, it's limited by the temperatures and the winds, so didn't quite get around it this year. So it's plan is next year. As soon as we find a good day, we'll get it done. Sounds
good. And Jim and Amy, welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show. Actually, you're repeat offenders, as it were. We're glad to have you back. Tell us a little bit how you got involved with CAF.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a third generation CAF member. My grandpa was a member kind of early on in our wing, did the wiring on Miss Mitchell and kind of got the rest of the family involved. So I grew up around the aircraft and the museum and the World War II veterans and everything. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. My dad was a member, my aunt was a member, some of my uncles and stuff too, and I actually met Jim there. Mm-hmm. That's how we got to know each other and even got married at the museum as well. So many, many years ago.
Yeah. Yep. So I grew up in an aviation family. So my dad worked for Northwest Airlines as an engineer, and so I was around aircraft a lot. As a kid, and always had an affinity for them. And 16th birthday present was flying in a T6, and it was out of Fleming Field, and then flew the next year with the same guy in his Marchetti trainer fighter, again out of Fleming, and for a birthday present, and enjoyed it a lot. And couple years later, I was going to A&P school, working at the airport in security, and a buddy of mine at work said, "Hey, I know of this museum. Let's go check it out." Went out there, and it was an off day, but one of the mechanics, Jingles Dufresne, he was there working on Miss Mitchell, and we chatted for a while, and I kind of looked around and I said, "Hey, I recognize this airport, and you know, I know one of the guys who has a hangar over there," and decided to go see if he was there. And he was, and it was Don Hines. And he said, "Oh, you're going to A&P school. You should talk to our crew chief, Jason McNeil, who is our maintenance officer now, and you should help us with Redtail. It's coming back in a month." And so that's how I started, was just kind of wiping bugs and cleaning up Redtail as a first introduction to the wing. So, and that was in 2001.
Yeah.
There you go. Now, you mentioned, Chris, you said in the cities. For those who don't know, the cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, where exactly is the wing located?
We're at Fleming Field in South St. Paul.
Yeah. So there's and for anybody who knows the cities, a lot of people think South St. Paul and they think downtown St. Paul Airport, Holman Field, because it's south of St. Paul. But it is 6 miles south of Holman at Fleming Field, which is just a little further outside of the ring. So.
Good. Well, let's talk a little bit about the history of the airplane. It's obviously been a part of the wing for quite a few years.
Yeah. She was donated to the wing in 1980. How did the donation actually happen?
There was Doc Kundle. He was a flight doc for the 133rd Airlift Wing, and he had bought a bunch of Warbirds. He bought Miss Mitchell from some groups up in Anoka. Miss Mitchell had originally been bought by a guy named Lysdale way back in '64, and it was part of a group of airplanes. Made in the Shade, Miss Mitchell, Lady Luck, and Betty's Dream, and the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum's B-25. They were all in that grouping that he had purchased, and then they went their separate ways, different buyers. So Doc Kundle, he had bought it, and it was in pretty rough shape, and he decided, I'm not going to get to it. So 133rd members, the Air Guard locally, they started the Minnesota wing. They had taken a C-97, flown down to Harlingen and witnessed the air show down there, and wanted to be a part of it. So they started Chapter 1 outside of headquarters, and
unit.
Yep, it was a maintenance unit, no aircraft to start with, and then eventually they said, well, I guess you guys can, because it was outside of Texas, so we couldn't have any aircraft. It was so eventually they said, okay, I guess you guys can have aircraft, and they got a few of them, an L5, a BT-13, a Harvard, and then Doc Kundle said, hey, I got this B-25 and I'm not doing anything with it. Do you guys want it? And a couple of private owners had owned a B-25 within the wing previously called I See No Problem, which eventually got sold, used for drug running, and then got taken elsewhere. So it
there's a whole story with that.
Yeah, it's in California now, awaiting restoration. But they got the B-25 from Doc Kundle and said, we're going to restore it, and started restoring it in 1980 after flying it back with 2 vice grips for a yoke. That was the solution to get it flown back to Fleming. So.
Do you know the history of the airplane previous to the 1960s? Yeah,
it bounced around down south at training bases. It made it through the assembly line. They took all the guns off, stamped T in front of B-25J, and made it a TB-25J. Eventually, it ended up with a radar nose and flew around. I think it was at 7 different air bases before it went into storage at Davis-Monthan, and then eventually got sold.
Was it ever used as firebomber, cargo, anything like that, or just sort of from surplus to Warbird?
Surplus to Warbird. Yeah, it sat. It sat in fact, a couple of our members have over the years in South St. Paul, when they were growing up there, they in the 70s, they remember climbing around in it and taking things from it, and so it just kind of sat in the fields and got torn apart. There were PB4Ys, and there was a B-17 for a while or two that Lysdale collected, and he just collected all these things up and all these aircraft up, and they sat for a very long time, and then eventually he sold them off. But yeah, he had a big collection. He had a big collection of aircraft, all kinds of different stuff.
The interesting part is, and we're looking at this slide, is that the name Miss Mitchell was an actual B-25 in World War II. So it even though the airframe is not the same airframe, it does take its lineage from the war.
Yes, yeah. One of our volunteers early on, Ray Osley, was one of the original crew chiefs on the aircraft during the war. And there's some debate on how they kind of landed on Miss Mitchell, but eventually
the airplane flew the nicest out of all the aircraft, and and it was the first silver aircraft, unpainted aircraft, that the unit got. And Ray wanted a classy name for the aircraft. There was a couple of different suggestions, Miss Minuki and Mr. Period, I think, was one of them. So
we're really glad they landed on Miss Mitchell.
So Ray was like, no, that's not going on my airplane. So he decided, she was the beauty queen of the fleet. So a beauty queen is called Miss whatever, so Miss Mitchell in this case.
Yeah. And there was also a story too that they wanted the bombs, or he wanted the bombs to miss the Mitchell. So, but yeah, I like the other one.
That's the one that has been landed on. As, I remember Ray saying that one, and Larry does too.
Yeah. So when they were kind of trying to decide what airplane they were going to model it after, they came up with something else, and they were going to model it after something that wasn't a real airplane. And Ray was like, wait a second. So I was on, this aircraft, and they kind of started going through the history, and I'm really glad that they chose an actual airplane, because it's such a powerful tool to actually share the history of a real aircraft and the people behind it.
Yeah. So yeah, this picture is Miss Mitchell during the war. There are a number of pictures that we have of her flying missions, and the representation of the bombs on the other side. One of our members, Kent Smith, spent a ton of time doing research into her missions, the history of it, everything involved, and so there are pieces to it, including patches on the aircraft that are representative of different missions. But specifically, the bomb missions that we have on the right side are from the Brenner Pass mission, where they won the Presidential Unit Citation. And it was a particularly difficult mission. They bombed Brenner a number of times, but it was a primary thoroughfare for trains to get in from Germany, Austria, into the Alps, the Italian Alps, and down into the rest of Italy. So that was their main target, was trying to keep that supply from happening. So they that was part of it. Don Oliver, who you can see the name on the left side of the aircraft there, and Ray Osley's below it. There were 3 primary pilots on Miss Mitchell, and Don was the only pilot who lost his life on missions. He was flying another B-25, and he got the Air Medal when he saved the rest of his crew, but brought the aircraft in and died trying to bring it down for a crash landing. So.
Well, I think it's interesting that, you know, so many of the Warbirds that are on the flying circuit today, they came out late in the war, you know, and was they didn't see combat. And the current Miss Mitchell, the airframe that we see today, was one of those aircraft. But to be able to tie it to an actual aircraft, and then having Ray, who is a crew chief, be able to, you know, have that personal connection to it, and I'm sure the stories that he's shared through the years really bring the whole story to life. And the current Miss Mitchell really has become the World War II version of Miss Mitchell.
Yes. Yeah, and we continue through all our efforts. We continue to try to make it as perfect of a representation to the original aircraft as we could make it. And you know, some of the neat details include Qualic.
Yeah, I didn't include this in the slideshow, and I should have. There were so many more things that I wish I could have included in the slideshow. But
go ahead.
So Kowalik, who did the original artwork on Miss Mitchell, How Boot That, and several other of the airplanes in the group, actually came back and redid the artwork for us on Miss Mitchell. So the paint job that you see on the bottom right was done by the original artist from the war as well. He was, I believe he and Ray were still friends, right? Yep. They kept in touch after the war. And so that's just a really cool piece of history.
Yeah, so we you know, have art preservation go on with it, because we can't just paint over it. Nobody can just go and paint over it.
Right.
So we have to kind of treat it like a true art preservation piece, because it is artwork number 2 of 2 by the same artist. And we've got a number of different pieces that he had done during the war. She's Engaged. There are a number of them that we have up on the wall that somebody had the foresight to build fake B-25 panels, and then when he came, he repainted all of his artwork on these panels, except for How Boot That, who he went down. That is the original airplane that Kavanaugh has, and he went and repainted How Boot That for them as well. So, which is it's really neat to see all that.
So the airplane comes to the wing in 1980, and we're looking here at its first flight in 1992. So truly was a 12-year restoration process?
Yes. Yeah. And serious restoration, not you know, not just kind of the spray over it and you know, clean it up and call it good.
They tore it all the way down.
Yeah, wings off, tail off, everything. That they did an excellent job of making my life easier in the future. Corrosion prevention, everything was sprayed internally and zinc chromated, epoxied as it needed to be. They did a tremendous restoration on the aircraft, and they made an aircraft that could last, you know, 50, 100 years without a problem. And we continue to reap the benefits of their efforts, and they really did an awesome job.
Yeah.
We included this one. This was out of Ray Osley's photo album, which we scanned the whole thing in. As his daughter brought it out and made sure we had it. And Art Ensley, who was he was the second pilot assigned. He was one of the original 3. Pat Sorrenti, his son, still contacts us on Facebook. Ray and Tom Bango, they met back together in 1992 and with Miss Mitchell, and they hadn't really seen each other since 1944. Wow. Which is pretty awesome. So
we do a really good job of showcasing a lot of this at the wing in our museum, but we're working really hard over the next year to kind of get some of this stuff online too for the people that can't actually make it to Minnesota, even though you should come visit us, just maybe not in January. I mean, you can if you want, but we're trying to digitize a lot of this stuff so that other people can kind of experience the history too, even from afar.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how the way the world has, the way technology has evolved. It's made it easier for us to visit places
Right.
where we might not have been able to before, but also I think it's made it easier for Warbird restorations to be able to share information back and forth, and sometimes parts back and forth, that sort of thing. Now there are a number of B-25s in the CAF that are flying with several different wings. Do you all get together and kind of share information and like a knowledge base?
Yeah, a number of years ago, 3-4 years ago,
Yeah.
we hosted in January. We made everybody come up in January. We hosted the first CAF B-25 gathering for maintenance specifically, and Jim Lashy had arranged it, and he got told this is never going to work. Nobody's going to, they're just going to fight. They're just going to this. They're just going to that. It was
great.
It was fantastic. Everybody came up. All the B-25 operators sent at least one person. Most sent two.
Yep.
And we had 2 days sitting around just hashing through how we did different things and sharing information, sharing parts, sharing little things. But I know we loaned a couple of stamps we had made to Devil Dog. They wanted to stamp their stuff with just restoration stamps that we had, and so we loaned them to those guys, and they got to use them on Devil Dog. It's just it was far and away one of the best things that we had done, because that contact remained, and we've met a few times since then. We'll meet at different shows, of course, too, but we met at Show Me in St. Louis, and a couple of years ago, 3 of us came down from the Minnesota wing, and then everybody again sent people up from all the other units, and had a great discussion and shared new information, and everybody's benefiting from it. It's pretty awesome.
What are some of the challenges that go into keeping a B-25 flying that might be unique to other aircraft?
Not very many, except the engines suck, to put it frankly.
R2600.
Yeah, the R2600 is
Yep.
is not a particularly fantastic engine to maintain. It's leaky, it's unreliable, it's it doesn't. If we had 2800s, the airplane would be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But
Does Chris feel the same way?
yeah, well,
I mean, we talked about you put them on there, but there were other issues. The airframe wasn't ready for it. Too fast. Yeah, it's little stuff.
yeah. Yeah, Steve, I don't know if you know about the NA98. They had an experimental aircraft where they put the B-25 Super Strafer, where they put the R2800s on it, and the pilot kept pulling up hard at the end of a day of testing, and he ripped the tail off, and that was the end of the project. But man, that must have been a great airplane. It is when you're talking about maintaining the aircraft, it is I think one of the best aircraft to work on maintenance-wise when you're talking about actual supported aircraft. There's still a type certificate holder. That type certificate holder is active in the the maintenance of the aircraft still. They produce service bulletins still. It's like maintaining a Cessna in comparison, because you have so much support for the airplane. The parts are available for it for the most part.
They're just expensive.
Yeah, there are well, I mean, just like every other airplane, right? It's the Air Corps library has multiple iterations of the drawings, so I'd sent them some of our drawings. They scan those in. If it was a bad one, somebody else had a better one, and so we've been able to use the drawings massively. The books were well written when they and because the aircraft was maintained until 1954 by the Air Force, there numerous iterations of the book post-war, and so it went from a pretty thin manual to a thick manual, and so there's a ton of information, parts, knowledge base out there, and it makes it really of the Warbirds. It's like maintaining a T6. There's just a huge amount of knowledge out there. So it's nice. It's nice to have that base.
Exactly. So for those who might be listening who are not familiar with a certificate holder, kind of explain how that is different than maybe some other aircraft.
Sure. So if you're talking about Cessna 172 or Boeing 737, the type certificate holder is Textron, Cessna, who owns Cessna, or Boeing in the case of the 737, and they are holding basically the design of the aircraft as an owner, and they also hold responsibility up until they decide not to maintain the design of that aircraft. So engineering support, service bulletin support, information. If they come across something, they collect information from owners. They send that information out so that when owners experience hardships for whatever reason, problems, they get the information out to these owners, and then those owners are able to inspect or fix or replace as they need to. And an example, I mean, T6s, for example, are not, they're supported by Boeing as the type certificate holder, but Boeing takes it's an unsupported aircraft in their fleet, and so they don't do new engineering and new service bulletins, anything like that. They basically washed their hands of the aircraft and said, we're not involved in it. They did a little bit when there was a wing AD that came out, but for the most part, they've been uninvolved with anything to do with the aircraft. Carl Scholl and Tony Ritzman, who it sounds like Carl's just the guy now, they are the type certificate holders for the B-25, and they maintain the parts supply, the largest parts supply for the B-25. And, they do service bulletins. They're available for phone calls. They're available to support the airplane. And
sometimes they're at events with us.
Right. And so you have somebody to go to, and they are collecting information on the fleet. They're getting that information out to other operators, and all of that stuff is massively different than almost every Warbird out there. It's unless you're dealing with a Cessna that is a Blue Canoe or something like that, where it's the same as something that's maintained in the GA world by a type certificate holder. It's like true combat operators. There's nothing else that has that.
Well, as you mentioned earlier, the engines are sometimes a little finicky, and that is kind of how you got into the 12 Planes of Christmas for this year. You're looking at another restoration or another overhaul of an engine.
Yes, yeah, it would be our second in about 3 years, and we're very fortunate. We're ecstatic. No, actually, we're not.
We're lucky we had a spare engine when we did.
Yeah, and we're lucky that we have a lot of talented mechanics and volunteers who could change the engine quickly so that we could get back on the road. But yeah, it's a hefty price tag to keep changing them, and we're trying to get to the point where we actually have another spare that's ready to go, but it costs money. And then we want to get back to continuing the restoration too. Some of the other photos that you had that you showed before were just a couple of the recent restoration projects that we've done, but we've got a couple of guys working on some brackets and ammo chutes, and just kind of continuing that restoration so that it looks just like it would back in World War II. So when somebody takes a flight with us, they're transported back in time.
Yeah. About how, and this is always hard to judge, but about how authentic is Miss Mitchell today compared to maybe where you'd like to see it in 3 or 4 years?
Project wise, let's see. We've got our ammo shoots to do. 3, 4 years. So ammo shoots are probably this winter. Delta Airlines is actually helping produce ammo chutes for us. They created a mold, and we're fabricating they are fabricating the ammo chutes for us for the tail guns. We're fabricating the ammo chutes for the waist guns. We've got the parts to install the life raft compartment. A big cost for us to continue the restoration is going to be about Carl has scoops available for the Holly scoops converted so that they work with our Bendix carburetors. That's about $10,000 for us to do that. That's a big visual change on the exterior of the aircraft. Eventually we want to redo the panel. That'll be when we start looking at new avionics. We did an upgrade in 2006, and that's held its own for a number of years, but we'll be looking at a new one, and we want to do something similar to what That's All Brother did, where you can cover up the necessary evils of GPS and all the things that we do need to operate safely, and make it look great when we're on the ground, and when we're in the air, be safe. Yeah, we're getting pretty close to just little details, and
she's as authentic as we can possibly make her.
Yeah, and we've got the markings on the aircraft, and it'll just kind of be a rotating cycle of remarking the aircraft, because you polish, you maintain, you walk around the aircraft, you're going to rub off markings, and now we have to go back and redo it. But yeah, that'll hopefully be in the next 5 years. That'll be the point where we're at, where it's fix the broken stuff and put the markings back on the aircraft.
Very good. Chris, what's it like operating the airplane, from point to point, but more importantly, when you're doing living history flight experiences?
It's a terrific airplane. I love flying it. I've been doing it for 3-4 years now, and it's really cool, especially when sitting events ago. Like I remember going to one, and we had a guy who was thinking about doing the living history flight, wasn't sure, and he's like, "So you just sit there like once it takes off?" I'm like, "No, second we get the gear up and we're up and away, like you're free to move around. So if you're up front, you crawl through the bombardier's tunnel, you go, and and we got the bomb sight in there, you can look through it and you get an idea of what it would have been like. And if you're in the back, you crawl to the tail turret, or we sometimes unhook one of the 50 cals and you can move it around and just kind of put yourself back in that time era, what it was like. And especially it's just, those R2600s is, annoying as they can be, they're loud, short exhaust stacks, and they're whether you're outside or inside the airplane on takeoff, it's one of the best noises. It puts you in the back of your seat, and it's a terrific airplane. But I have never had someone get out of the airplane and say that wasn't worth it. Some people will say I don't need to go again, I'm good, but most people get off and go, I'd go again. I want to go again. Like the sounds, the feels, again, you get to move around, and just, if you rode in the front, you're like, well, I got to go again so I can ride in the back. And, just every seat's a good seat. We always joke when no seat's a bad seat in the house kind of a thing. So people love it. And both just people just taking rides because they want to see the airplane. You get people who have connections. A lot of people come up and say, like, their grandfathers or great grandfather, whoever flew in these airplanes. And the best thing about, especially Miss Mitchell herself, as I've noticed, is that she is able to pull out these stories from people that they don't tell people. We've had veterans come in the door and they just start telling us stories about their days, and the parents are with them. They look at us and they go, he's never talked about this. He doesn't want to share any of this. And suddenly he's telling all these stories because he sees her, and she just pulls these amazing stories out. And it's cool to be a part of it, and especially if they go for a ride. This year we had the amazing opportunity to go down to Louisville, and we did 3 rides of 98 to 102-year-old veterans.
Wow.
And they time of their lives. I mean, they rode, and I mean, they didn't move around, but they had grins the whole time. We had a guy, he took his first airplane ride out of that airport, and he's like, this will be my last plane ever flying, but it's going to be out of this airport and this airplane. I'm done. I will drive everywhere. It's just, this is the last thing I need to do in an airplane. It was cool, and it was just eye-opening and a lot of fun.
Well, it is amazing, and that's a story that's repeated, throughout the CAF, is that a lot of times the aircraft themselves become this conduit for stories that veterans have not told before, and very similar is like my dad never said anything about the war, and now he's sitting in front of the airplane and just it's all coming out, and that's one of the neat things about CAF and actually flying these airplanes. I mean, there's a lot of places that have great museums, great restorations, static displays. You can get up close and everything, but there's something else to be said for getting up close and personal, smelling it, hearing it, watching it actually do its thing. It's an incredible experience.
It really is.
So, about how many hours did you put on the airplane this year?
But funny, we actually just looked this up. It was 115 in the last 365 days. So pretty busy year. Kind of cruising around places, but also just doing a lot of history flights. I mean, in Bemidji this year alone, we did
84 riders.
Wow.
84 on the B-25. We did another 20 on the L5, 21 on the L5. So yeah, busy.
Yeah.
So do you go to a lot of air shows, or do you mainly kind of stick close to home?
Depends. We do. It's a good mix of everything. Where a lot of the ride flight stuff we do locally, kind of here, or sometimes we go up to St. Paul's downtown airport and fly out there a little bit. It kind of just depends. But we also try to do a fair share of air shows. We've done Oshkosh. We did. Did we do Duluth this year?
We did Duluth, Offutt. We did a bunch of them. Janesville, Williston. Where else did we go? We did a
July 4th fly. We do an annual July 4th flyover, and we go through the Twin Cities and then go into Wisconsin and down. And it's kind of a blur, honestly. I don't quite remember.
We're booking next year already, and so those are and 26. So those are floating through my head. Like, we got Eau Claire. No, that's next year. It's we got a lot of stuff that we did this year.
When you go touring with the airplane, or even at home base, do you have a PX that goes with it as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we usually bring a lot of merchandise. We've got wrong side. We've got our fabulous B-25 t-shirts. We've got a lot of merchandise that we bring on the road with us, and it's always a hit. Hats, t-shirts. We've got a great new challenge coin that we put together, and it's the tail of the B-25. It's really cool. So people love it.
Very good.
Like we always try to come up with
one online too. You've got that.
Yeah, it's all available online.
On our website. Yep.
Every location's different, like what they are buying. And we always kind of do a running joke. We set PX. We're like, okay, what is this town into? I mean, we did Billings last year, and challenge coins are flying off the shelf. Whereas the next location, nobody wanted those, but every hat was gone, and just everything's different. And so, but people love it. They always love to come up and have something, be able to point at the airplane and stuff.
Excellent. Well, as we're looking at this particular picture, and you see the wood ceiling. Not only do you have great aircraft, but you've got a great hangar. That's the home of the Minnesota Wing.
We do, yeah. So our hangar is actually a World War II hangar. Fleming Field was actually put together in preparation for World War II.
Starting in 39.
Yeah. So the hangar is almost 100 years old, and it's a great bowstring hangar. It's really great for our hangar dances as well because of the acoustics with the wood. But it's also a neat piece of history because, they actually had Stearman's. What else did they have at Fleming?
It was all Stearman's.
It was just Stearman's, yeah. Which we're getting a Stearman.
It was a naval air station. It was Minneapolis had a naval air station. Fleming Field became Base B because Minneapolis had a number of people around it, and so they created a base B because they wanted to be able to night fly and not bother the neighbors. And we were far enough outside of the cities at that point that they were able to use that field. Fleming Field started. It was called Hook'em Cow because they did a lot of cow processing back in the day.
The stockyards
were very close. And so it was Hook'em Cow Field, and it started in 1924. So the Navy took it over and technically still owns the airfield. They lease it to our city for $1 for 50 years. It's actually coming due soon for the lease, which will probably just push on it. Yeah. But yeah, the hangars were full of steerman maintenance, and they had barracks there for the maintainers. George Bush Sr. flew out of there. Mm-hmm. There are 2 of his original aircraft floating around. One of our pilots actually owns one of his aircraft now and flies it into Fleming every now and then, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So
that's really good. And this next slide takes me into something else. Not only do you have a very unique facility, but you as the slide says, passing the legacy on to the next generation. But as we can tell, looking at the 3 of you, you don't fit the typical mold of what people would think of as a CAF member. You're obviously, much younger, don't have a direct connection to World War II, but yet you're drawn to the aircraft. And I think this picture really shows it, passing on that legacy from the old guard or the experienced mechanics to the next generation. So how did you manage to make this happen? Because so many times, there's not an entry point for younger people. They don't feel welcomed. But how did the Minnesota wing be able to kind of pull this off?
Very carefully.
We were young when we started. Amy and I were, and I was 19. Amy was younger than me, but 7 when you started coming around?
Probably.
And we were given the opportunity to be leadership by the World War II veterans, and that gave us the opportunity to show other younger folks that there is a chance for you to do more than just be on the outskirts sweeping floors or doing that. We all did it. We've all swept floors, and we all still do it. And everybody chips in. Whether you're a new member or an older, long-term member, older member, doesn't matter. We all do what's necessary to get the job done. But yeah, you don't have to be relegated to just one task. And once people started understanding that, and I don't think membership-wise, the World War II guys never expected that from us. We were expected to help and do the job, but they were excited to see people who wanted to do more than just, kind of hang around and drink coffee and do that. And so they gave us an opportunity, and we were able to pass that on to the rest of everybody. That's been the whole goal is, more and more it's how do we give people the opportunity? And the next generation, Chris, coming in, most of those guys, they didn't get the idea that they could do this, and they didn't know how to break into it. And over the last few years, especially, our ops officer currently who brought Chris in, Trevor Henson, he's brought a lot of people in just by saying, hey,
come on down,
come out, get involved. There's a picture in here of a young lady, her Emmy, and Emmy on the left, and Trevor's on the far right. And Emmy and her boyfriend Mike fly the aircraft together now. They live in California, and they wanted to get involved. Trevor said, hey, come up to Minnesota. It's the group of people, the right attitude, to help out, and they're looking for people to pass this on to, more than just, hey, like, yeah, okay, you're a kid, and we'll get you there eventually. You got a lot of time left. That's, we can get people there, and take the time, but a lot of people walk away. You want to be able to step in and know that you're going to get somewhere with it, and we try to give people that opportunity. So
Trevor's done a really, and a lot of our pilots, and I think just people in general, have done a really good job of posting on social media too. And they're showing what they're doing, which in turn people are like, oh, what are you doing? How do I get involved? So that's another way that we've been able to expand, but just trying to create a team of people that.
Well, it's kind of self-fulfilling, right? So we started it as 2 people, and then some of our younger friends that got involved with it started coming around, and then it just grows into this thing that just evolves on its own. We had, Trevor got involved, got Chris involved, then other friends of Chris's got involved, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And all of a sudden you've got a ton of people walking in the door going, yeah, how do I get involved? I want to be involved. All these younger guys are having fun doing this awesome thing. And they just, it just meshes really well. And then, as Chris and his buddies, who are our buddies too, everybody's friends there, but Chris has a couple of close friends that he hangs out with there on a regular basis, and we watched them. We drove away one night, which usually we're used to being the last ones there. For years we were the last ones there. And we drive away, and they're driving around our M37, just watching airplanes take off and land, and goofing off, and that's what we used to do. And it's awesome to see that next generation of super dedicated CAF members who treat it as a home instead of just a place to go every now and then. It is their place, and that I think. So much of it is giving people the chance to have it be their place. This isn't our place that we're letting you be in. This is our place. Yeah. This is everybody's place, and we want everybody to feel like it's a piece of theirs. And if they do, then they're going to take it very seriously and do their best job to make it better.
I think.
Go ahead, Chris.
For me, like, I still have this very strong memory of one of the second times after becoming a member. I walked in the hangar, and our crew chief on the B-25, he's up on a ladder working on the oil cooler, and I just walked up, and I kind of stood back, didn't want to get in the way, hands in my pockets, and he works, stops, looks down at me, and he goes, "What are you doing?" And I was like, I'm just watching, and I thought I offended him, and he walks down the ladder, and he goes, "Wrong." Hands me the tools, and he goes, "Let's go." And we got up the ladder, and he starts teaching me how to tweak on things and starts putting me to work. And it was like, yeah, and immediately just, he wants people to be a part of it and wants the younger generation to come in. Like I said, it's the pilots, but also the mechanics. Like if you come up with the right attitude and just like, hey, I'm here to learn, let me learn, and they will hand you tools and they will put you to work immediately and learn, and it's cool. And like, Jim had mentioned, it's just this bonding thing where we all jokingly make fun of each other, but like we all would, stand up for one another in a heartbeat. And it's our place. You walk in the hangar and like you might have one day off of work, and it's like, well, it's Wednesday, I'm going to the hangar. That is what it is. Got to go see people, hang out, see some airplanes, drive a vehicle around. Like, yeah, it's a great place and people.
You become family.
Yeah. And it is.
It's much more than a museum.
Yeah.
An aircraft. It's a family.
Yeah. Chris, the other picture where you were showing the young guy with the 2 older guys, the guy on the right is Larry. He's our crew chief. He's 82 now, and he picked up one of our other pilots, Mitchell. What was he listening to? Was he listening to Drake when he came rolling up or something? Yeah, he was listening to Drake, and it's an 82-year-old guy in the car by himself, and he's listening to Drake. And one of our pilots about Chris's age is like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Why is Larry, at 6 o'clock in the morning? Why is Larry listening to Drake? And it's whatever. Yeah. So Larry's one of those individuals, and I know a lot of the B-25 guys know Larry, and he's a brilliant mind in
special.
general. He's absolutely brilliant, and he's got to be one of the best B-25 guys in the world by far. And he's also just in general just kind of a unique personality. He looks at everybody the same. Nobody's age doesn't matter. Nothing matters. He cares about every single person that comes in there, and he wants to teach everybody everything they want to know. And all the pilots go to him. I know Chris went to him and learned from him early on how the engines work, how it's starting procedures, all that stuff. All the pilots go to him, and he loves teaching what he knows so that he can pass on all of that information. The young guy on the left, I think he's 21 about then.
Yeah, probably 21.
He's an A&P now. Got his A&P through working with us and a couple of other operators. Didn't go to school for it. He just he started when he was 8 years old with us, and super sharp when it came to maintenance. He'd come out to the hangar and inspect things just because he didn't have anything else to do. So I think he was 14 when he found pretty serious issue that happened during a restoration of one of our other aircraft, the PT-22, and he decided he was coming out to do a pre-flight on the airplane because he was bored, and he started doing a pre-flight, and he realized something doesn't sound right. So he called me up, and I came out and met him there, and sure enough, 2 cables had been crossed, and they were rubbing, and it was quiet enough that he was able to hear it, and and he was 14 and knew to do something about it. But yeah, now he's starting to take over some of the operation from Larry. The two of them are working pretty hand in hand and really getting close with the airplane, and it's fun to see. It's fun to see the transfer, and we keep telling Larry, even if your body can't do it anymore, your mind's still there, and just keep supervising, guide them, and help them out, and and he's doing it. And he struggles a little bit with people, taking the work over from him, but he enjoys seeing so much help and new people coming out.
Well, that's great. One of our viewers, Richard, has a question for you, and this one is going to take us back to the Doolittle raid. So, Richard asks, from your experience about flying and maintaining a B-25, how problematic would it have been to fly until you ran out of fuel, like the Doolittle raiders did after the bombing of Tokyo? Secondary question: can a B-25 fly on one engine? And any flight or landing characteristics that would make it more or less deadly to crash land, as the majority of the Doolittle raid did. There you go.
Chris, from a flying standpoint, mostly start with the one engine.
Yeah. So B-25, it can fly single engine, and we do practice that. Every year we go out, we do our recurrent training, and we'll go out, we'll do standard, steep turns, stall, stuff like that, and then we'll do a simulated engine failure where we set the engine up that it basically is producing 0 thrust as if we did shut the engine down. After certain maintenance procedures, we are required to do an actual full shutdown in flight, and I've done 2 of those now, where you basically shut down, make sure it works, get it restarted, but we do a lot of training of flying the airplane around on one engine. We'll come in and we'll do landings, again, simulated as if it's out. We still have it there if something happens, but we practice to fly the aircraft if we need to fly single engine.
I don't want to get too slow with it. It doesn't do well if you get slow on one engine. You're not going to be able to go around easily, and if you're too slow on takeoff, it can be an issue. But once you're up and once you're going, one engine is just fine. running out of fuel. I mean, you can fly until you run out of fuel. It's nothing. In fact, if they had landed safely, just throw more fuel in it and it would have started and run and everything would have been perfect. Safety to the aircraft from a maintenance aspect, it really wouldn't have affected it too negatively to run out of fuel. You could still feather the props because you've got oil system doing that. So you can just shut down everything, and as long as you maintain your speed and directional control, you can pretty much keep it going straight, Chris, for the most part. Don't turn too hard.
Yeah, I mean, as we kind of talked about, we flew today, and our biggest things is we do a takeoff briefing and talking about if we lose an engine, about prior to gear retraction, after gear retraction, what are our options, what are we doing? And it's something that we want it to be quick, concise, agreed upon, making sure we're handling, feathering the correct engine, stuff like that. But it's got to be kind of quick because you're in between getting off the ground speed versus the speed that it's safe to fly at from rolling over from a single engine. There's a bit of a gap there. So it's, but that's why we practice, why we train. It's why we verbally brief everything. We put our hands and we'll point at things, and that way, if it ever happens, we're ready for it. And as Jim said, same thing, like coming in for landing, it's respect your airspeed, respect it. And the 25 does have a point where it's like, once you're to a certain point of landing, we call it our commitment point, where we put our flaps full, because at that point you can't go around.
Yeah.
But again, and that's why we train. We talk about considerations, things like that. Where are we going to land if this and that, and kind of that stuff. So it's a little bit it's tricky, but that's why we train, why we practice, why we have ground school every year to go through all that stuff.
Yeah. So just out of curiosity, if you did just fly on one engine, would that increase your range? Or would the increased drag and everything else kind of just negate the fact that you're not burning as much fuel?
I almost feel like it'd be a wash, because you probably increase your range a little bit, but you also are increasing power to compensate for the other side, and you are going to have some adverse drag. And once you get feathered, it's not horrible, but you're definitely cruising a lot slower and putting more power. I mean, the first step when if we do our engine failure is to increase the power on the running engine to compensate for it, and then we can, once we're all set up feather, we can adjust it from there. But I mean, you probably extend your range a little bit, but I think it would not by much, in my opinion.
Yep, it's all right. Oh, and by the way, Richard said great analysis anyway, so he appreciated your opinion. Just a couple of minutes left. If someone wants to get involved with the Minnesota Wing, find out more about the museum, when you're open, want to become a member, how do they do that?
Yeah, they can go to our website, which is cafmn.org. We're located at Fleming Field in South St. Paul, and we're open Wednesdays and Saturdays from 9:30 to 5:30. And if you send an email on the website, it comes to me and I'll answer it personally or pass it on to one of our volunteer staff.
Sounds good. And then the real question of the night is, how do you keep her so shiny?
Carter and Chris and Jarrett and Snow. We have a team of people.
Yeah, so it had been, what, 10 years since the last restoration or polish job on the aircraft. Lots of cleaning, but Carter decided it's Jarrett. Jarrett asked, how long does it take to polish a B-25? Jarrett should know. Because he helped with that. It took all winter last year, and
it was a long process.
That was a lot of cutting to go into that aircraft. It took a lot of effort for those guys, and now that they've done it, they're really starting to. They're going to do it again this winter. At least that's what they've told me, and it should be a lot easier for them. Yeah,
I think we'll make them do. I thought it's too late now. They're committed.
So it took What?
Rather than a 6-month process or a 4-month process last winter, they'll be able to do it in 3.5 months, right?
Correct. Yeah. It took 5 guys working on it. Carter was the primary, and there were 5 guys working on it through the winter, and it was a ton of work. We had a professional company come in. That was the 10 years ago thing, and they said, "Oh yeah, we can do this. It'll take us 3 days." 3 weeks later, they finished it, and they had done it for free, and they were furious that they had done it for free because it was way more aircraft than they thought it was, and yeah, it's a lot of effort. Everybody who's ever done it just goes, "Oh man, that was a ton of work." So, but we've got a big team now, and we're getting more equipment, and if you want to donate to help. If you want to donate to help buy supplies for that, we go through a lot of polish.
Oh, sure. And of course, watch for Miss Mitchell on the 12 Planes of Christmas, which will be coming out not too long from now, just a couple more weeks, and we'll kick off the campaign. And if you can support the B-25 as they try to get another of their engines overhauled, so they've got the spare, I'm sure they would appreciate any support that you could give them.
Absolutely.
And thank you for joining us tonight. Of course, as always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on this episode, or if you have ideas for a future topic, just drop us a line at media@cafhq.org. Again, if you like tonight's show, please share it across your social media platforms, and remember to subscribe and click the bell icon to get notifications when our new episodes are posted on YouTube. All right, until next time, I'm Steve Buss, wishing you blue skies and tailwinds. Have a great night.